I know that I'm not supposed to allow this information to get out, but I'm really afraid and lost. I'm a damn sheriff. I've been working on the force for 15 years, and I am admittedly scared fucking shitless. This morning, I got a call. This was not at all uncommon. Our town was small, the station only having a secretary and 5 deputies. They were all well trained, but I admit that they can be completely absent-minded at times, and often need my assistance on even the easiest tasks. This morning was not one of those mornings. The call was coming from a voice I didn't recognize, but later would learn it was a family member of the force. Yesterday, 2 of our deputies, for anonymity's sake, we'll call them Deputy Tyler and Deputy Harris, went on a group family outing on Tyler's boat. They never came back to shore. The lake is on the far border of the town. It's a pretty large lake, too. Probably about 20-30 miles. Our town happens to be the only town on any side of it. The rest of the area is thick with trees. Panic set into my gut immediately, but I pushed it down and let the woman on the phone know that things would be okay and we would figure out what the deal was. I heard a sigh of relief on the other end of the line and said my goodbyes before hanging up and dragging my ass out of bed. My wife stirred a bit, but just turned over and resumed a light snores. She was used to this by now. I arrived to the station to find my remaining 3 deputies pacing nervously around the Central Command, aka the main office. Apparently, they were fully aware that Tyler and Harris were missing. I did my best to calm them and set them down, treating it like any other larger-scale investigation. We began to discuss the basics of the situation. We were looking at a case of 5 missing people: Harris, his wife, his 12-year-old son Donnie, Tyler, and Tyler's latest fling. After about 30 minutes of discussing it, we got some volunteers together and started out to the lake. Around this time, I remember that Harris' boat had a radio that was tuned into our stations. I clicked my radio in my second squad car and switched it to the station he'd be likely to use, static. Still, I left it on for the remainder of the drive. I had just about given up hope when we reached the lake and saw nothing when the static cut out. I waited to see if anyone would speak before picking up the speaker. Hello? Is there anyone out there? This is Deputy Robinson. Silence. Then something else happened. It was almost like a growl, but it sounded distant and quiet. I spoke into the receiver again. Harris, Tyler, if this is you playing a game, it isn't funny. Silence. Growling. Silence. Finally, it cut out the static again. I thought about relaying this to my search team, but ultimately I didn't want to upset them any more than they already were. We set out in 2 different search boats, opting to circle the lake and meet in the middle where there was a small island. It's about a couple feet round, has a singular tree. It's off limits to civilians because it's unstable. The sweep found us nothing, so we headed towards the center of the lake. As we approached the small island, I could see Harris' boat sitting a few feet away from the small landmass. The closer we got, the more clearly I could see. There were 5 people laying on the beach. However, when we finally arrived, I could see that they were not sleeping while they waited for rescue, as I had stupidly hoped. I brought the boat as close as I could to the small island, before turning off the engine and telling the 3 others that waited, looking on in horror. I jumped into the grass, my shoes sinking a bit into the ground. With caution, I approached the bodies. The first thing that I noticed was that they were, in fact, the Harris and Tyler families, though some parts were missing. It was a goddamn gore show. The worst thing I had seen in my entire career. Out of respect for the families, I will be leaving out the details, but it felt like I had been transported into a horror film. I heard one of the volunteers vomit off the side of the boat and decided it would probably be best to take them back to shore and come back for the bodies. I swear to God, we were gone for no more than maybe 15 minutes, but it looked to me like it was even worse when we returned. Fresh blood flowed out of the wounds that weren't there before. Not just any wounds either. Bite wounds. As we started to move the bodies, one of my deputies noticed that the kid was still alive. This wasn't just a recovery mission anymore, it was a rescue as well. Morale picked up a little bit as we moved the deceased into one boat and the young boy into the other. We rushed him to the hospital. Meanwhile, I called the medical examiner from the next town over. Ours had recently retired and we're still looking for a new hire. I had my deputies accompany the boy while I opted to meet up with the examiner at the station. She examined each body carefully but swiftly. Her face was a bit pale when she had finished the job. "Sheriff, you're not going to like what you're about to hear." I nodded for her to speak. "Well, the bite wounds are human, but there's something else." I had begun to sweat. Human bites? The fuck? No, she had to be wrong. Still, she went on. "Each subject has flesh in their teeth. I won't doubt that if we were to do some tests, they would all belong to one another." For the first time in my entire career, I was dumbfounded. Right afterward, I got a call from the hospital. The kid died within minutes of arriving. They asked if they could send the body in an ambulance, and I said yes. The examiner only took minutes on the body, but confirmed that he too had flesh in his teeth. The medical examiner highly suggested that we call the FBI or the CDC. I've been sitting at my desk for hours now, and I feel like I'm losing my mind. I made the call about an hour ago. Both organizations are sending someone out. I keep trying to wrap my mind around this, but I just can't. They still have plenty of food on the boat from the day before. What would cause a group of human beings who were missing for less than 24 hours to eat each other? "Pay no attention to the corpse in the back," said the professor as we entered his classroom. That's how my second term biology class started. I was in university, fresh off my winter break and morning end of a good holiday season. I had stayed on campus and spent my time getting drunk with my buddies. The fun was over and it was time to get back to studying. I had looked up to my bio teacher, Mr. Blackburn, on Rate My Professor the night before, to know what to expect. His reviews were underwhelming. The guy was apparently a real bore. Students said he was monotone, never joked and never cracked a smile. That's why I was surprised at the state of the corpse in the back of the room. Mr. Blackburn didn't strike me as a funny man, but I guess he must have had a bit of the devious streak in him. The body had been placed behind a row of discarded tables and broken chairs. It sat in a sturdy wooden crate, wearing a civil era uniform. There was a sombrero on its head and a Pine Air freshener dangled around its neck, like a lame gangster medallion. Again, I didn't peg Mr. Blackburn to be the kind to joke around. Maybe the old coot had grown a sense of humor, or maybe he'd lost his marbles overnight. Either way, this being biology class and all, I figured the body was there for a reason other than giving us a good laugh. I squinted and examined the corpse. It looked old. I don't mean it was decomposing, mind you. Heck, it was so well preserved that it didn't even emit an odor. I mean, the person it used to be was an old man. Its skin was shriveled up and mummified looking. Its arthritis-ridden arms stretched out at sinister angles that reminded me of tree branches in the dark. I looked at its face and saw its mouth and eyes were wide open, giving it an appearance of shock and terror. Man, must have been a rough death. Mr. Blackburn started the lecture. He certainly lived up to his reputation, and by that I mean, I fell asleep after 10 minutes of hearing him drone on and on. In fact, I can't recall a single lecture that didn't end with me dozing off. After class, the other students and I exchanged theories about the corpse and why it was there. Over the next few weeks, we started to notice that someone, presumably Mr. Blackburn himself, changed the body slightly between classes. Trying to figure out what the prof had done to it became our new pastime. Sometimes its arms had been repositioned, other times it was several feet away from its starting position. Even its eyes could, at times, be spotted looking in a different direction. The corpse became our creepily awesome mascot. Whenever Mr. Blackburn caught us looking at it, however, he would clear his throat to draw our attention to the front and repeat what he had told us to on the first day. "Pay no attention to the corpse in the back," he'd say slowly, his voice colder and harsher. It was weird, because he had this gleam in his eyes whenever he told us not to look at it. I swear it was like he was taking pleasure out of knowing we were peeking. He had the exact same look a toddler has when he drops his trousers in front of a group and lets loose on the carpet, knowing he's doing something wrong, but relishing the moment anyways. There was something off about Mr. Blackburn. One snowy afternoon, Cynthia, a really hard chick that sat across from me, dropped her pen, rolled to the back of the class and stopped right between the corpse's feet. She sighed loudly, looking more annoyed about having to get up than frightened to approach the body. Now, I'd been pining over Cynthia since the start of the semester, so it was only natural that I turned my head to check out her fine behind as she bent down to pick up her pen. She suddenly shrieked like a harpy, and I knew exactly why. "He's still alive!" she yelled, confirming my suspicions. The class erupted in laughter, assuming she was playing some sort of trick. I knew better. I had seen it move too. Its foot had twitched ever so slightly when she reached for the pen. I even saw its contorted fingers barely outstretch, as if trying to grab her, but not having enough strength to do so. I overheard someone making a joke about the stiff trying to check out her rack. I was too freaked out to respond. Cynthia threw the pen at the body and ran out of the classroom, frantically dusting herself as though there were bugs all over her. The class erupted in an indiscernible chatter. Upon hearing all the commotion, the teacher stopped his lecture. He calmly turned his attention to the corpse and then to the rest of us. "Class dismissed," he said in a calm and unaffected tone. Mr. Blackburn straightened his papers, collected his things, and calmly exited the classroom without another word. His nonchalance seemed to put the room at ease. Had the other students seen what Cynthia and I had seen? I'm not sure they would have left the room cheering about their good fortune. I overheard someone say the teacher had probably rigged the body with electrodes or something to cause it to jerk. I wanted to check, because I wanted it to be true. Still, as the mass of students barreled towards the door, I felt compelled to follow and leave with them, like a mindless lemming. In hindsight, I regret not examining the body before I left. The next day, the corpse was gone, and it wasn't the only thing missing. Mr. Blackburn didn't show up for class. The old man never returned to school, no letter of resignation, nothing. The police was eventually called out to investigate, but found no traces of him. After an internal investigation, the school discovered that massive amounts of powerful anesthetic and embalming fluids were missing from the storage room. As I passed through the hallway near the dean's office a few days later, I saw a plaque with the pictures of all the school's faculty members. Whoever it was that had been teaching our biology class for weeks wasn't Mr. Blackburn. No, wrinkly old Mr. Blackburn looked a lot more like what we thought was just a corpse in the back. When the board appointed me CEO of Syrian Automations, a mid-sized company that had sprung out of the dusty Texas earth at the beginning of the Silicon Age, I was given my own office. For someone of my age and stature, having an office of my own was no new event. 10 years before, I had begun to grey I had my first office, and now, 10 years after the silver hairs invaded the army of chestnut on my scalp, this office should have felt no different. But as I moved my laptop and belongings into the enclosure, much more vast than any I had experienced, the office did not quite feel mine. My books looked too small on the tree trunk of a desk, and the entire wall of double-pane windows made me feel as if outsiders could view my every move. "It's tradition, Patsy," said the last CEO to me as he left for retirement. that this room be reserved for the CEO. The company's founder, Dean Hedingson, declared it so in his will when he died in the 80s. He even declared that no changes be made to this room, not even to the carpet. Ever since it has been so, if not by the formal letter of the law, then by respect. I'll tell you, call it coincidence or not, the only CEO to almost drive us bankrupt was also the only one to insist against working in this very room. "Thank you, Ryan," I said, shaking his hand as he prepared to leave with my much smaller one. "But I assure you, we will succeed despite from what room I choose to lead." "Do as you will," he said, and dropped a new nameplate on the desk. In the sunlight from the window, the engraved letters of Patsy Moppet stared up at me. Though I'm not superstitious, I kept the office, with its furniture 30 years out of date. Across from my desk there was a life-size picture of Dean in a dark suit, smiling through his wrinkles while sitting in his favorite leather chair, an enormous monolith that dwarfed my frame. Underneath the picture read, "Order shall flow from the chair of the leader, and through his virtue will the group succeed." A quote that even my pride found pompous. He wore a ring on his finger with his initials, one that he used to stamp documents instead of his signature. But Dean had been known for his daring market tactics, maverick attitude, and knack for succeeding in even the riskiest of situations. So perhaps I was wrong in my judgment. F.R. Warthog was etched into the chair's frame. They were the finest luxury chair makers at the time, and arguably to date. With age, the chair had grown lumpy, however, and I would have switched it with a newer model had it fit through the door. But it had not, and I was quite confused how Dean had managed to move it into the office so long ago. As weeks passed, I grew more accustomed to my office, and I remembered why I had been chosen for CEO. "We believe that in this time of economical turmoil, Patsy," said Jane, a senior member of the board of directors, "that your calmness and deliberation in making decisions will prove an asset to the company as it moves through rough waters." But now, after being promoted, I found my attitudes changing, much to the angst of the board. I was nearly outed after pushing to purchase a small business researching a new form of alloy for metal gears. But the board members were silenced when the business had a breakthrough 2 months later, quadrupling their value. Adrenaline flowed through me at their first success, seemingly a chance of fate, and I pushed harder to drive Syrian automations to new heights through deals that could only be classified as gambling. In my success, I smiled and sank deeper into my chair. I drove the economy into tides of debt and profit through investments, but our values soared as one after another excelled past my expectations. Then, 6 months into my stay as CEO, the best opportunity yet fell onto my desk in the form of several stacks of paper, outlining a plan that awaited my signature to proceed. Jane alone stood across from me as I raised my pen, her blue eyes ablaze. "Patsy," she said, "you and I both know that this is the most ridiculous scheme yet. I don't know how you pushed it past the board, but you're making a mistake." "Just like the alloy gears were a mistake, Jane? Tell me, what's one proposition I've signed in the past 6 months that has failed?" "All luck runs out," she said. "Hell, this is insane. I'm leaving you a sign. It's irresponsible to our employees, and you're letting them down." "Without me, they wouldn't have jobs," I snarled, outraged at her accusation. "Listen to me. Even crazy old Dean," she whipped around, pointing at the portrait on the wall, "would have shot this down." "I know what I'm doing!" My voice was rising to a yell as I stood. The stitching of the leather chair behind me popped with a sudden motion, threatening to burst, but held together. "Any leader would know I'm doing the right thing. And if Dean were alive, that relic of a legend, I'm sure he would do the same." "Do as you will, Patsy. But if it fails, the company's failure is in your hands. Dean would not let this pass. In anger, I sat back down, uncapping my pen to sign. But I never did. The stitching of the leather chair gave way with a loud snap, and an arm in a dark suit's sleeves fell across my shoulder. With a yelp, I jumped out of the chair and whipped around as Jane began screaming. The arm protruded from the inside of the chair, ripping through the fabric and hung limp. It looked as if the flesh had been cleaned away and the bone shined bright white. Connected to the arm was the rest of the skeleton, pocketed away within the padding of this enormous chair. 2 eye sockets glared at Jane and me from within, though the figure remained motionless. An initialed ring fell directly from a finger on the dotted signature line, leaving DH dented into the paper as the metal band clattered to the ground. I've never read Dean's will, but I'm assuming the part about his wish to be buried in his office had not been made public, and that he had one dedicated lawyer.